Well, hello there, and welcome to Critical Weight Theory, where we look at a lot of different topics, and this time we're going to be looking at the complexities of money, wealth, and the human stories behind them. Well, actually, we're just going to look at the money situations that can happen when a loved one dies. And, that's a tragic thing. Maybe you'll find yourself in this situation, and you're wondering, what to do. So we're, diving into a topic that's as challenging as it is critical. What happens to finances when someone passes away? So I'm going to look at why some families find themselves paradoxically struggling to pay bills despite inheriting maybe even significant wealth. That's a scenario that can actually happen. And I'm going to look at the responsibilities tied to a loved one's outstanding debts. So let's get started. Really, I do need to note that I'm not an expert on this. This is just what I have gathered doing research for this episode. So I don't want you people out there to think that I'm like the final judge, jury, or verdict on any of this stuff. So, you know, it's really just to provide you with some basic information that I've gathered. So there's a bit of a paradox of wealth, as I mentioned. Just imagine the scenario: a family member passes away, leaving behind a substantial estate. Yet the family finds themselves unable to pay everyday bills. How does that happen? The paradox often stems from the complex process of probate. It's the legal procedure of managing and distributing a deceased person's assets. Now, maybe you're like me and you're typically broke as a bum, and the idea of even having the word estate associated with you is a bit of a joke. Like, who's going to inherit anything from me? Well, I guess in that case, this question's not going to be as much for you. But who knows? Maybe you have a situation where you're about to inherit something or whatever. Maybe this episode will give you insight into what you should do if you want to leave things behind for your loved ones, for your family, your friends, your pets, whatever you've got that you want to leave behind to the people or the animals that you care about. So there's, complex estates. Large estates can include diverse assets like properties, investments, or business interests spread across locations. Sorting through this web can take months or even years, leaving families without immediate access to funds. And imagine that. Maybe you've been in that situation. I don't know. I guess that would make it easier for you to imagine it. Add to this the possibility of legal disputes, and the process becomes even slower. So this has to do with executor challengers or challenges too. An executor or the person responsible for managing the estate may face steep learning curves in the process. If they're inexperienced or overwhelmed, delays in distributing funds and settling debts are almost inevitable. So be prepared for the possibility of waiting. And there are also legal fees because probate, like so many other things in this world, it just is not free. So high legal fees and administrative costs can eat into the estate, reducing the cash flow that families might need for immediate expenses. So again, be prepared for a possibility like that. So what about the bills? This brings us to a question many have surely asked. If your spouse or loved one passes away, are you responsible for their debts? The answer is it depends. So there are many different factors typically involved. Did you have joint debts? If you co signed loans, credit cards, or any other financial agreements, you're generally responsible for paying off those debts after their death. That can be different from individual debts, though not always different. Debts solely in the deceased person's name are usually paid out of their estate. However, if there aren't enough assets in the estate, creditors may have to write off those debts unless you live in what's called a community property state. So, what is a community property state? Well, I'm glad you asked. In states like California, Texas, and others, debts incurred during the marriage can sometimes be considered shared obligations, even if they were in one spouse's name, and hypothetically, maybe even if you didn't hear about them. So you might be in for a surprise, an unpleasant surprise. Who knows? There are exceptions that exist, such as debts from before the marriage. Those generally will not be carried over, and that's unless you know, acquire that debt jointly and you sign something saying that you're responsible for it or partly responsible. So there are exceptions in special cases, at least from what I understand. Federal student loans, for example, are often discharged upon death. Medical debts can be trickier depending on state laws and doctrines like the doctrine of necessities, which might hold you responsible for essential medical expenses. So how about that? That sounds like a real blast, right? So, how do you go about managing financial fallout? What can you do to protect yourself and your family from these situations? Well, here are a few actionable tips that I have acquired while looking into this stuff. So, obviously, one of the good things is to understand the estate process, learn about probate laws in your area and how they apply to your situation. Probate attorneys can be invaluable resources here, and hopefully, you can afford one. Going back to my earlier point, I couldn't even imagine being able to afford an attorney. They would have to do it pro bono. And, you know, I don't know how often probate attorneys would do that. So, you want to prepare in advance, encourage loved ones to create clear, well structured wills and estate plans. And hopefully, you won't sound like you're someone from a Forensic Files episode, you know, because a lot of those episodes involve people, you know, getting corrupt and getting involved with people's wills and all that kind of stuff. If you've seen enough Forensic Files episodes, you know what I'm talking about. So you don't want to come across in that way, and hopefully you aren't like that. So, let that one, kind of not be a factor for you. That image problem. And, being prepared in advance includes naming a capable executor and ensuring assets are easily accessible where possible. Know your rights and obligations. That would be another thing to do here. If you're facing debt related challenges after your loved one's death, seek legal advice to clarify your responsibilities and protect yourself. Community property laws and creditor rules vary by jurisdiction, so you might be in for a fun journey in that regard too. It could be a tricky thing to figure out, and communicate openly as well, as you should do in general with your life. If you're co-managing finances with a partner, regularly review the joint obligations, insurance policies, and emergency plans to avoid these unpleasant surprises that can sometimes just creep right up on you. So remember, knowledge and preparation are your best tools to navigate these emotionally and financially complex situations. Or, you could just throw your arms up in the air and say, hell with it. I'm just not going to be concerned about any of this stuff, and you know, let let things happen. I guess that's up to you. Obviously, I can't guide you through these types of situations, but those are the basic things that I have discovered, and hopefully things will work out for you if you ever are in this situation. And hopefully you have honorable intentions, and you know you're not somebody who ends up on the forensic files. So, all right, that's all I have to say about it, and you have a wonderful day.